Thanks for joining us today. I should tell you to start things off. This is Tim Schmidt in Austin. Gene Hodges is on the call as well. We're going to run through Inner Circle 2017 for the mid-size newsrooms. And I should also tell you that the entire presentation will be emailed to you automatically within the hour after the conclusion of the presentation. And also slides and any questions that you may have, go ahead and drop them in the chat box, and we will answer all of them afterward in an email to all of you. So if you do have some questions, please feel free to answer or ask them, and we will answer them, but we'll do so after the fact just so that we can keep this moving as quickly as possible and then send it out to as many folks to watch it as well. As I said, we're going to start Inner Circle 2017. The one thing I'll start by saying is it's not radically different than Inner Circle 2016. And there's a reason for that. We know that a number of newsrooms are in flux. This has been an interesting year to say the least. Staff sizes, a number of editors, other folks have either left or changed jobs or are adapting to new positions within the organization, which is all great stuff. This was not a year to heap on a number of changes. And also we felt pretty confident about the direction of the program. Last year, a lot of the digital goals that have been added over the last year or so, these are pieces that we already think are in place to help you ensure success in your news organization. And so it didn't make a lot of sense to radically change them at this time. So there really is quite a bit of continuity. And really, I'm going to leave this part up to Gene because this kind of dovetails on what Bill Church has been saying. But Gene, lead us off on the goals here for 2017.
Sure, okay. Really, I think that there are two things. You're going to be hearing a lot more about them from Bill Church, who, as you guys know, is the new SVP for News. And his two goals for 2017 is to do journalism with impact and to embrace our future. And the thing is that Inner Circle has been, really promoting those things, but you'll see a bit of a tweak in the in-depth news when we go over it, where before we were very interested in kind of doing daily enterprise, and we really still value that. Like, we think that people should be planning centerpieces, planning week stories for each day for the dailies. But this year, instead of focusing on that daily enterprise, we're focusing on a weekend, so a weekender, a good Sunday, strong Sunday piece. Because we thought to ourselves, as good as that planning is for the dailies, the weekly, that big, nice weekend piece that really has some impact on your community, that's the strong thing. That's going to be that journalism with impact. So that's one of the things you'll see. We'll talk more about that. And then embracing our future, a lot of Inner Circle really is digital now, and that kind of pushes towards the future, and really looking at mobile too. As you'll see, there's a bit of a tweak for mobile as well. So I think that's just a good thing.
And to dovetail off that, continued audience growth. Go ahead, Gene.
Oh, I was just going to say, yes, one of the things that we can do as a newsroom, and we talked about this last year at our editors conference, but one of the things we can do is really focus on growing audience and learning about our audience and engaging with them online. So that's still a huge goal for us here. So maximizing social media engagement and other initiatives such as video that really increase time on site. And the last one, helping smaller newsrooms. You may feel like you're in one of the smaller newsrooms. We have a lot smaller newsrooms than you guys, but smaller newsrooms really have a lot of resource problems. This Inner Circle, as Tim will tell you, isn't meant to be a burden on people as much as it's just a chance for us to really get to know what you guys are doing, a chance for us to really measure against, as we said, the big priorities for the year. And so we did actually reduce the number of categories for your size newsrooms and also for the smallest newsrooms. Actually, all newsrooms.
And that's a great point, Gene. As I say all the time, this really isn't designed to be a punitive program. This really is designed to share some best practices, yes, to make sure that there are some certain standards that you're meeting, but also to make sure that we can help dive in a little bit to each of the properties and make sure that we get to see some of your best work and share what you're doing so that it can help other folks around the company, because that really is such an important piece. And while she said that about helping smaller newsrooms, you're on the cusp of that. You're in the middle. And so really the program has also been pared down a little for you as well. We're trying really to make this as reachable or attainable for newsrooms as possible. As we worked closely with some focus editors, a number of folks who sat on a bunch of calls with us, representing big and small newspapers from around the company, we talked about things that needed to be implemented. We talked about some changes. And then also we talked about some things maybe that needed to stay status quo, or things that have just been implemented that people are starting to get up to speed on, maybe digital win tools, other things like that. But there are some changes, and that includes the elimination of Twitter as an expectation, which, trust me, makes every one of us who has had to scroll through every one of your reporters' Twitter accounts every quarter for the last 2 years very, very happy, as well as it makes them happy, I'm sure. Also, Facebook has been changed from a quantity to a quality expectation, and I'm going to have Gene talk about that in just a little bit, because that's a really interesting focus that we're trying to put on that. Also, newsrooms will again be responsible for alternative story forums, and this is something that Jean, with her Digital Next and other programs, has rolled out on the digital side. More advanced storytelling and keeping things within reason, within your staffing levels. And then finally, LinkedIn will not now be accepted as a social media selection. We'll talk a little about why that is in just a couple of minutes, but that won't be one that you can choose if you're going to do the extra when you do this extra social media pieces. I'll give you some of the field feedback, because like I said, we sat down with all these editors, and we really do. I say this to folks all the time. I personally am just the traffic cop. I'm not the lawmaker. And the lawmakers were the people on that call, the folks who decided, hey, look, we need to make sure that the emphasis is on in-depth news. We need to make sure that we're doing a great job with our Facebook posts instead of just throwing quantity over quality. So this comes from within the organization. And what we heard from folks are newsrooms are a little overwhelmed. Like I said, a lot of changes, a lot of turnover. And so what can we do to kind of offer some stability, still with increasing our digital presence, as you constantly hear Gene talk about? I mean, as we move to mobile, as we move to different platforms, that's such an important piece if we're not staying on top of that, and making sure that we're creative about the way that we approach that. And like I said, if you want to be part of this discussion, if you decide, hey, look, I have some things I'd like to say about Inner Circle, we would love to have you. I have an editor already lined up for next year after yesterday's presentation. If you have something that you want to talk about, or if you just want some feedback, if you need help with something, please reach out to either Gene or myself. We'd love to help. That's what we do. Again, it's not designed to be punitive. This really is to try and help and offer support, and sometimes just offer a second set of eyes on things that maybe you haven't been thinking of how what your strategies are. Everything for the Inner Circle handbook, from the Inner Circle handbook, is now updated at the bottom of GatehouseNewsroom.com. So if you want to scroll through the handbook at any time, I know Gene sent it out a week ago or so, but it's also there at the bottom of the website at any time. And now I'm going to give it over to Gene to talk about the expectations for just a second, but notice, again, paring down from 11 to last year's 7 to this year's 6 in terms of expectations, Gene.
Yeah, so the idea there, again, is to make this manageable for you, and also keep the priorities where they really need to be. So we know that video is a huge priority for us. It's great on mobile, and it really does help people in terms of, keeping people on our site a little longer, giving them another layer to a story. In-depth news, which, as we said, is all about community, kind of impacting your community, and alternative story formats, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but those really feed that mobile audience as well. And as most of you know, and probably know about your own website, that more people are coming to us on mobile now than desktop. So this is an audience we really need to really purposefully grow, and really give people a different way of experiencing news on that site. But we'll talk more about that. Facebook, we'll get to as well, and then the digital or the other social media selections, which don't include LinkedIn, and then the last one, digital influence. But as you can see, fewer than last time. And Twitter, we did drop. And again, that was a recommendation from the editors on that council, and Here's what I would say about Twitter, though, before we get too far into this, is that we still value Twitter. Twitter is still a great news tool, and it's especially great for sports, for people who are doing prep sports, because a lot of teenagers and, kids in high school are on it. You can communicate with them if you know their tags on Twitter and stuff like that. So we don't think you should not be on Twitter. It's just that we think that, our time in terms of evaluating what we would notice as things as we would go through all these reporter accounts is that people who got it really got it, and there were some people who just didn't. And it wasn't driving a lot of traffic to our sites, but I do think it's a great communication tool especially for breaking news and for sports.
Absolutely. Now, one difference between you and the smallest newsrooms is you still have weighted categories. The folks in the smaller newsrooms have to hit everything to pass Inner Circle. You folks in this bracket can still miss either Facebook or social media selections and pass, not both, but one, and still be certified. But you can't miss the any of the other four, which would be in-depth news, video, ASFs, or digital win tools. And I'll let Gene talk a little about staffing, because that is a question that we kind of get on a pretty consistent basis. I know we have some new properties in as well, so Gene will kind of clear that up for you in terms of how we determine the staff size.
Right. Okay, so for staffing, one of the things to do, especially if you've been in Gatehouse before, is double check the categories. We have changed them in terms of where the breakups are, or the cutoffs for each one. So be sure you check that, and don't just assume that you have a similar expectation for in-depth news, for example, as you did last year, just because you see the word on there. So double check your, where you fall in the cutoff. But in terms of what we count as employees, we count all full-time employees in the newsroom, with the exception of anyone who still does their own design. A lot of designers, are not in local newsrooms, they're at CND now, and it seemed just unfair, really, that the ones that did have designers suddenly were considered a much bigger paper, and really, that was the reason that we did that. But so full-time employees, everybody in your newsroom, that includes sports. A lot of times people ask that question. Is sports included? Yes. So sports reporters, photographers, newsroom assistants, all of those folks are included in this as full-time employees. As I said, not included designers, but also anybody who does revenue reporting, such as ad reps or people who handle classifieds and announcements, are not included. Freelancers also not included. So any correspondent or anybody you're paying just by the story or by the photo, not included. But part-time employees are, you just add them up. So if you have two part-timers, that does equal a full-timer. One of the questions we had after yesterday's session is, what if you have like a half, like 19 and a half or something like that? Just always round down. I mean, you're not in the bigger category unless you actually have reached the minimum for that category. And then open positions, get a lot of questions about that. If your position was just eliminated at the end of a quarter, count that position, because that's a person you had who was capable of doing this stuff. But if a position sat open and you don't have any approval to fill it, that's not it. That we wouldn't count that. So.
And again, if you have any questions on that, just feel free to contact either Gene or I. We'd be happy to help you determine. And we're not out to stick it to you. We really want to work with everyone as much as we can. That's why in the past, it used to be in the smallest newsrooms, it was 0 through 8, and now we've split it up to because it didn't make sense that a 2-person newsroom was being judged on the same merits as a 7-person newsroom. So we've changed that. So if you have any questions or concerns, please go ahead and feel free to give us a call or email. Okay, let's get into the video expectations. This is all pretty standard stuff for you folks. This is 8 for anyone who's 9 through 13 in their newsroom. It's 14 per week for anyone that's 14 through 22. Essentially, it's 1 per week per person, basically. I mean, some of you in the low 20s get a little pass on that, but that's essentially what it is. And the reason for that is pretty simple. I mean, it's driving and increasing engagement time on our sites. It's obviously a source of revenue. As mobile audience grows, this is really important to us. And it's things like breaking news pieces, sports pieces. There are so many important pieces that can be told quicker and better through video than they can be be through the written word. I was thinking about a couple of recent instances where the Columbus Dispatch during the Ohio State incident last week. I mean, we clicked through every one of the videos that the reporters were posting, and I thought that was just an important piece. Of course, they had a roundup story, and of course they were tweeting and doing all the other things, but those few videos that they had really kind of added a flavor to that scene, into those stories that really they couldn't have gotten anywhere else. And of course, through the use of Tout, hopefully this is much more simple. I know there have been a few glitches. If you have an issue, feel free to reach out to Gene or myself, and also Penny Reardon. She'd be happy to try to help you. But hopefully that has made it easier in your newsroom. And I will tell you, speaking of Tout, it used to be something from an evaluator's perspective where we went through and counted every video in your bucket to see how many videos you had. We no longer do that now. If you create a video in Tout, that number is sent to us at the end of each month, and that's how we determine whether or not you pass. So if you think there's a problem with that, also feel free to reach out to us. In terms of shooting video, this is a one-person operation in Destin, Florida. And there's a great plane crash video. You can see the guy actually holding up his hand to show how it went down. These can be quick. Obviously, you're doing these already, but for the longer form and higher production stuff, you really want to use traditional cameras. And the key is just trying to look for emotion and movement as often as possible. And Gene, as you've said before, making sure you have video on those top stories is a huge piece.
Yeah, definitely. What we've seen is, Tout actually helped us to understand this because they work with a lot of other news sites, not just us, but that the videos that end up doing the best and performing the best on the site are those that are on top stories. Penny Reardon, who sends out the Tout report, just sent one out, I think, today, and one of the things that she's doing now is showing how many videos are actually matching with top stories, and it's never exceeded 40%. If it's just a situation where, it was a house fire, but we didn't get there until it was burned out, you'd still see if somebody's around to do a little interview with. Another possibility, just because those are such good layers to have on those top stories, people will eat everything up that you can give them about that. But another possibility is to do a reporter, just a little reporter piece on the scene, or even at the newsroom, just to say, here's what we know, here's, we're waiting for this, or just kind of a little update from the reporter about the story. It's just another quick way to do that video for a top story.
And as I was saying yesterday on our call, one of the things I've heard from multiple reporters now is that what they'll do is they'll actually shoot a quick Tout video, for example, maybe a sports post-game interview, upload the whole thing, and then go back in the office, and that's how they grab a couple quotes off of it at the end. So you're working it into your workflow. Makes a lot more sense than adding something extra. In terms of video ideas, if you can find people swinging during yoga class in the Poconos, you should absolutely put that up on your site. I love that video. Also things like crime, weather, of course, before and after and during. Business stuff is great. Sports is a natural. Construction project updates is one I don't think we do enough. That's obviously important to almost all of our communities. And then youth bands and even fan of the game stuff. If you can get your sports guys out of the mold of simply shooting a video of footage of the game and talking to a couple people and adding flavor to that story and to that web presence, that will probably be very, very helpful. In terms of what we look for in evaluation, like I said before, this is a straight number that comes from Tout. There's no length or production requirements. This is a great video, by the way, from the two-person Havelock News when they found an alligator in the garage in a home there. I think it won a couple of our awards, and we recently highlighted it on GatehouseNewsroom.com. So this doesn't take a ton of effort, and even small newsrooms are doing a really great job of it. On to Facebook, which is a fun one. And I'm going to have Gene talk about the difference in what we did before and what we're going to do now, because Facebook is such an important part, and we're changing the way that we look at Facebook for newsrooms your size and bigger.
Right. So what we were learning from people who were writing about Facebook's algorithms, which they constantly change, obviously, which doesn't help us out very much, But what people were saying is that the algorithm really does favor posts that have some sort of engagement. So if you're putting up a whole bunch of stuff to meet some sort of inner circle requirement, and only 20% of the stuff that you're putting up is really getting a lot of engagement, that could be really hurting your page. Not just for that one video where a lot of people won't see it, but really even just generally for any of your posts. So for the mid-size and larger papers, we thought to ourselves, does it make sense to have just increasing numbers of Facebook, quotas or something like that for you guys? Or is it more important to have really good quality stuff? Now, that said, we do expect you guys to be posting every day. There should be something every day that goes on Facebook. Facebook is just absolutely huge for us for referral numbers, as I'm sure you've seen by looking at your numbers. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But what we were thinking is that we could actually be hurting people if we're saying, oh, you have to post 22, Facebook posts in a day, when that day maybe you have 12 that are great. I'd rather see the 12 that are great, So please don't stop putting great stuff on Facebook because you will see a huge drop in your traffic. That said, put great stuff on Facebook, if that makes any sense. Hopefully it makes sense.
This is a good example of the Alice Echo News Journal, tiny little town in southern Texas. As you see, they have 276 likes, a number of shares, and if you go to their Facebook page, I think they're a 4-person newsroom. This is like a constant thing with them, getting over 100 likes, getting over 50 shares. This is something that a small newsroom, even that size, but they put a priority on what they actually post. And of course, you want to be posting when the folks who are going to be on Facebook are on. It makes more sense. So if you don't look into your analytics, if you're not paying attention, if you're not trying to put a variety of things up there, some questions, some links, some photos, some videos, some sports, if you're not trying different things, and if you're seeing poor results, that may have something to do with it, is because you're not trying a number of different things. So here's what Jean was saying in terms of quality posts. Now, you must still post to Facebook 7 days a week. You must post these things manually, although you can, and that means no automated feeds. You can still schedule them out, but they can't be an automated feed. And you have to have a Facebook business page, not a profile. However, 90% of your posts need to have a photo or a video, and that includes Facebook Live. Also, your post text cannot repeat the headline. It has to be something that's unique, and it also must include some post text. Talk about why that's so important, Jean.
Right. I mean, it's just, again, people, and you probably know this yourself, and we're all on Facebook. So if you're scrolling through your Facebook feed, you're just missing things that don't have visuals. So that's why the first one is so important. There could be times when you have breaking news, you don't have anything yet, and you're going to put that up there. Absolutely. That's why it's not 100% of them have to have an image with it. But the ones with images, the ones where there are videos attached are really doing better. Also, in terms of video, native video, Facebook does value that. So again, that helps to push your content out and helps it to be seen by more people just within the Facebook algorithm. So video is important to native video. But if you're in one of the smaller of the mid-sized, newsrooms and you're really just cranking and, especially on certain days, just get a photo with it. Absolutely. That's, even if it's a file photo or something, from someplace else or, not someplace else, make sure it's relevant. But just make sure that you have a visual with it. That's really important. In terms of the post text, not repeating the headline, it's just like in print, you would never have like a headline and a subhead with the very same text. So it just doesn't give people any more information. So find something, even if it's a nice little quote from the story, find something to put up there.
And in terms of the numbers, why it's such an important piece, I mean, this came from Sherry Horton over on our desk 2 days ago. She told me that in November, last month, November, 91% of all social media referral traffic that we get as a company came from Facebook. I mean, that's just an astounding number. And 23% of all of our traffic overall comes from social media. So those are huge numbers, right, Jean?
Yeah, definitely. Those referral numbers, that's people clicking through. But, we do value, and you guys do, I'm sure, as well, but we really do value that engagement on Facebook, too. But when we look to see how much of our traffic is actually coming from Facebook, and we don't necessarily want it to be like, 80% coming from Facebook, because it's nice to have a mix. But to see that, we're in the 20s, in some sites you're in the 30% referrals from Facebook, again, it's really important to have great stuff on Facebook. So please keep doing that.
Exactly. And now on to in-depth news, which is something that for the most part, this category, this bracket of folks have done really well at in the past, but we want to make sure that we kind of maintain that. And like Gene talked about, getting a great Sunday or weekend package put together is just so important. Many of you have really, just from working with you and talking to you about what you're doing in your various newsrooms, the planning is the key to making sure that you execute these properly. For you, this has not changed a bit. We're looking for compelling, enterprising news, provides more than a rehashing of an event or a press release. It basically has to be something that you can tell has been thought out in advance. It takes a proactive approach. It has some answers or prompts some action. These are the pieces. Here's something from the Medford Mail Tribune about how they closed a basement of a jail and what the impact has been, how a number of folks have now been sprung from jail early because of that. In fact, 1 in 3. This is the type of piece that really is going to resonate with readers, and they're going to now recognize or maintain, you're going to maintain your place as the real bona fide news source in your community. That's why it's so important. And the evaluator's checklist is the same as it has always been. Stories must have at least 2 sources. We'd prefer 3 or more. And I would assume with staff sizes of your staff size, you should be able to do that. It has to be a reporter-driven piece. Can't come from an event or meeting coverage or just from a press release. And it has to have that nut graph, a paragraph or breakout that explains why it's important to readers. Going back to the 2 sources, Gene, you talked about this yesterday. I mean, it's just such an important piece to make sure we have balance.
Right, and also just to make sure that we have rich voices reflected in our stories. Sourcing is so important, and we know that it's easy to call up the folks but to get out there and really understand how readers are experiencing news is just a huge part of these in-depth pieces. And I've heard people say, well, if you say it's in-depth, but it's 2 sources, well, that's how we do our basic stories. That is absolutely true. So I would say, this is just, for us and for our measuring purposes, but especially now that this is a weekly expectation, you should be doing more than that. Absolutely. To me, in-depth news is a far richer story when it has more sources and better, a better mix of sources. We talk here, and we did last year as well, that it doesn't count to just talk to the mayor and the deputy mayor or something like that. It just doesn't. That's just being sources to the city. So you want to make sure you have that mix and you have some neighbors who are impacted by the news. So.
Absolutely. And again, reporter driven, this has to be something that one of your reporters or an editor or someone kind of looked at, and I always say let ferment just a little bit. They looked at something, maybe something that came from a meeting, oftentimes coming from meetings, and thought about the impact that may have in the community down the road. And that's part of the key to this, is making sure that it's a wide topic. If it's a feature story on one person, it may be a really wonderfully written feature, but that's not going to impact the whole community. So that's how we judge this in terms of reporter driven. And also the nut graph, just make sure that you can answer the question, why does this matter to my readers? And there it is, the Gainesville Sun telling you right in a breakout right at the top of the front page why it matters about a lake that was a popular destination for boaters, and there's been a lot of issues there. So that's a perfect example. All right, on to alternative story formats. The monthly expectation for 9 to 13 is 2, for 14 through 22 is 3. And Gene, I'm going to let you talk about this because you're the expert at ASFs.
Oh dear, it's just because I worked here for so long. So I think one of the things to know is this sounds like a new category, but it's sort of what it did was it took lists, which we had last year for you guys. You guys were doing lists and have been doing them. It took that and it just expanded it a little bit because I love lists. They are an alternative story form. But really, what we were looking at with mobile and the fact that our mobile audience is growing is that on a mobile phone, when you're scrolling through a story, and especially if it is one of the longer stories, but even if it's a shorter piece, it's nice to have things that are in manageable chunks, and it's really great to have text that goes from, bold to regular, bold to regular. It just helps to draw you into the story and move you through the story. Now, should everything be told in an alternative story form? No. I still love great storytelling and narrative stories. It's wonderful. Keep doing great stuff. I'm just saying, in some of your stories, it's really important to think about those mobile readers, especially when you're just giving them information about something. So why use them? You want to break down complicated issues, and that's fine.
Sorry about that. I got trigger happy on you.
Yeah, no, we can go to the next one because it kind of answers the question too. It's just like, what do you use self-service story form? Why do you use the story, an ASF rather than a regular story? And a lot of fact-heavy stories lend themselves to ASF. A lot of just really complicated stories. Just sometimes you lose people, and you can't afford to lose people anymore halfway through a story because they're like, I don't really know what this is about. So a lot of times this big complicated story is told better in, say, a Q&A, and it just could be, here's a question a reader would have, and here's the answer to that question, and just guide people through it in that way. And again, you can kind of see how that would really be a nice experience on a mobile phone or even on a tablet too. So multiplayer stories, visual stories. So a good example of a visual story is that list. Doing a listicle. You've got the photo and you've got a blurb underneath about it. You've got another photo and a blurb underneath. We still want those entertainment lists as part of this, and that is part of the requirement. But the other one or the other two that you're doing are going to be it could be a news alternative story form.
And by the way, if you haven't seen this example, it's one of my favorites. The Canton Repository put together a series on some of the most famous folks from Canton, from Stark County, and it was such a wildly popular feature at the end of last year that they've done this every single day for the whole year of 2016. At the bottom of their local page, they do something called Stark's Famous, which is just another famous person, someone who's been nominated throughout the community, can be from any spot in history, and it's got their Wikipedia facts, basically, an about, bio, the connection to the community, and a quote from someone else, typically about them, or sometimes from them themselves. So just a great example of a really good ASF. What are other examples? Well, there are Q&As, FAQs. FAQs are one that we should probably dig into at some point a little deeper because it's such a great example. Lists, issues, pros and cons, bio boxes, team capsules, day trips, election stuff, all kinds of fun stuff. And now, Jean, I just want you to touch really quickly on what might not be an ASF.
Okay, so a lot of times people say, you know what, I did a really, really cool Facebook Live on this. That's an alternative to telling a story on something. I would say that is a great thing to do Facebook Live. It's not what we're looking for here. What we're looking for here is more text. I mean, when you do the list, obviously there are photos with it too. You can do photos with any kind of ASF. But what we're looking for is a story, like a traditional, like, words and, that kind of thing, just broken up by nice either subheads or lead-in, bold lead-ins. That's what we're looking for.
Perfect. All right, on to Instagram and the different social media selections that you can choose. You have to choose one of the three. As you see, the expectations for this group is that would be 3 per week. Why Instagram? The numbers are still really solid for them. As a matter of fact, it's doubled since the Pew Center started tracking social media platform adoption in 2012. And while other groups are growing at about a 3% rate in social media, Instagram is supposed to grow 15% this year. A perfect example is the Northwest Florida Daily News. Man, they have like 12,500 followers. Just basically a solid strategy of finding the beautiful places in their community and putting them up on their Instagram page, and sometimes retweeting or reposting other folks' photos. It's just such a great mix if you go on their page and if you want to get some ideas. And somebody said to me the other day, well, you know what? We don't have a beach like they do. Yeah, but you have something that your community identifies with. And if that's old buildings, if it's musical venues, if it's sports things, there are places that people in your community that will resonate with them, even folks who don't live there any longer. And so if you put those up consistently on your Instagram page, you're going to get quite the following. The evaluator checklist, you can see we just look for consistency, and that's essentially it. What to post, if you have stuff from the archives, that always does well. Behind the scenes stuff from your newsroom. Like I said, here's another picture. This one's from a reader who sent this in. They reposted a great photo and they tagged them on it. And as you see, it's a beautiful picture. Got 200 and something likes. So that's just another great example. All right, I'm going to have you do Pinterest, Jean. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, sure. So same thing in terms of the expectations, 3. And Pinterest is another one of those growing platforms. And one of the things that that we encourage is people who have a lot of good feature content or entertainment content. Pinterest really seems to resonate with people in those categories. And let's see, what we look for is just, again, make sure that you're doing the right quantity of them, 3 per week. These are some examples of things that you can put on Pinterest. Wedding photos, and stuff, people look for wedding stuff on Pinterest all the time. So any kind of wedding stuff, wedding photos are great. Reader photo call-outs, so you can, include some really good again, user-generated content there. Recipes, as you know, if anybody's on Pinterest, people look for food and recipes all the time for their boards. And there's just, a lot of different things here. I mean, you could do sports and news and from the archives again, anything visual. I mean, it's just a very, very visual platform.
And food that you make at home and also local restaurant stuff too. Both of those do really well. Yeah, on to Snapchat. And this is, again, like we keep saying with social media, growing. This one's the fastest. It's now got 200 million monthly active users. Basically, folks who are on it spend 25 to 30 minutes a day on average with the platform. Yes, it's a younger group. It's a tougher group to engage in some ways, especially with news content. But boy, in many markets, it's a completely untapped resource that you can use that other folks are probably not using, TV stations and other folks in your community. Here are some things to snap, behind the scenes, sneak peeks. Weather does well on this again. Clips from interviews, newsroom festivities, community events. Those are all fun things to get on Snapchat. So now we get the digital tools, and the expectation list for you folks is either 1 or 2. And there are a number of digital tools. If you want to go to the Inner Circle Handbook, there's a big, long list. But if you want to try something different at any point in time, feel free to just reach out to one of us. We want to make sure it's something that is not just a quick fix, that you're not trying to just post 20 of them in a half an hour at some night because you haven't done anything all quarter. But we want to work with you. And like, for example, quizzes are now moved over into digital tools. So that's something, if you've been doing, and you have been doing already, you can now integrate that into your digital tools expectations. And why digital tools, Jean?
Well, for one thing, this is really about creativity, and it's really about telling stories in different ways. Really giving people additional layers for the stories that they're looking at online. And it really goes to embrace your future, embrace our future, which is one of Bill Church's, big priorities. So the Digital Win Initiative is really about pushing the limits and giving readers different ways to experience a story. So whether it's just even a simple locator map or it's something that's much more sophisticated and interactive that might take more time. But there are some of these that are really quick and easy to execute. There are people who are doing Juxtapose, which is that then and now slider kind of thing. That once you get into the swing of doing that every week, I know you have some papers that rely on that, which is kind of an idea.
Hey, folks, if you're still on the call and don't have your phone muted, could you make sure you do so? Because we can still hear some background from someone talking in their newsroom. I appreciate it. What are we looking for in terms of evaluations? Well, they have to be on the approved list, or you had to have reached out to us at the beginning of the quarter and said, we want to try something different, which is no problem. Like I said, you have to hit the expected consistency, and you know what? Like Jean said, this is supposed to be a time for your folks to be creative. So to mix and match tools to meet these expectations really is the best way to approach this. And individual tools, we can change expectations at any time if it's something that we think, if you think that you really want to use. And again, goes with a lot of the things that Jean has been pushing in terms of digital next pieces in the various newsrooms. Okay, we kept this to 40 minutes. Jean, anything else you'd like to say before we let these folks go?
I'm trying to think. There was one thing that I thought, if you guys are going to try Snapchat, because it is just a way to reach out to a new generation of people, just make sure that at the beginning of the quarter that you're going to use Snapchat, that you let us know, because obviously Snap stories do not stay up on the site, so we have to monitor that throughout the quarter. So you've got to let us know right off the bat about that one.
Good point.
I think we covered everything.
Yeah, thank you. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, for folks who are new to the program, I know that there are a couple that are on this call. If you have anything else that you're not sure about, please feel free to reach out to either of us. We'll be happy to get back to you as quickly as possible. And again, I will send out this entire presentation probably within the hour. If you'd like to pass this along to other folks in your newsroom, that's fine. And then also, I'll have the slides for you as well. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.